what would you say to watch out for as you're aging, and when is it time to kind of make that decision? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this anymore. How do you do that?
Eric, you've asked a serious question. Nobody ever asked that question. A few that do.
I'm Eric Reese. I sell real estate for a living, but I fly and instruct in the Aerostar for fun. Join us on our travel and training adventures in the world's fastest light piston twin.
So now 2 years has gone by, and I remember when you did that because I saw the airplane at one of the conventions where you just painted it on.
Yeah.
And so that goal was met. And now we're at this point where I'm here and you've decided to sell the airplane. What made you make that decision, and how does that feel? I mean, you're not truly at a point where you've lost your capacity mentally and physically to fly, but you made a decision. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to do.
It is. I had a medical situation, which I won't bore you with, it's recovered. I didn't fly for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't feel like flying either.
Okay.
So it's resolved itself. Right? And so I said, I need to go get my biannual flight review and instant proficiency check. And there's a nice little flight school there. So I flew around with my wife, co-pilot, in VFR, and sort of peeking out, sometimes hood, to kind of get so I could fly the airplane, and I thought I could. And then I got about 10 hours with the flight instructors, just doing instrument approaches and whatever they could think of. And I didn't like the way I flew. I knew I could fly better. And they were, well, you're okay, but you're 80 years old, so, guess what? Promise not to fly after dark or something. And I finally began to realize that it's frustrating to have a machine that can do this, can fly up where the high winds sing and go 1,000 miles and land for lunch and go another 1,000 miles before the sun sets. And I didn't have a mission for that anymore. Yeah. I did when I had a company. I'd go back and forth to the east and west coast, and I enjoyed it. Of course, my colleagues pointed out that there was a cost to this, engine overhauls and fuel and all that sort of stuff. But I enjoyed it. But now the only mission I had was to go short distance to see grandchildren that I didn't particularly want to see. And I didn't, it wasn't fun anymore. Mm-hmm. And what the icing on the cake was early this year. It was icy here. We flew out I've been to La Quinta out in Palm Springs a lot at conferences. Usually I'd fly this thing out in the spring, and it was okay. But if you've flown from Colorado Springs to Palm Springs, you fly over some of the nastiest looking ground in the world. It's the definition of drought down there. It's not much fun, but so I flew out there, and it was cold here, and stayed with some friends of ours. And I walked out on their grass, and they have a place right on a golf course. I walked out on the grass with barefoot, with shorts and a T-shirt and a cup of coffee, and I walked right off their patio and took 3 steps into the most perfectly 1/4 inch thick grass with water on it. It was between my toes, and I was looking at the sun coming up in the shadows of the palm trees over the Arnold sculpted course, and the birds flying around. And my wife, I was smiling. My wife took a picture. She said, what's going on? I said, I want to do this. How do you do this? Well, I want to walk out on the golf course in the spring and winter with coffee and field water and have a jacuzzi and a little swimming pool right there. And I want to do that. I said, maybe we should rent one of these places. Impossible. Maybe they don't rent very well. $10,000 a month, minimum 5 months and things. Well, you can buy one. Well, that was actually, it turned out, barely within our budget. And said, well, when are we going to use it? well, when it's cold here, we're going to go there, and then vice versa. And you can think about it, Colorado Springs is a delightful place.
Sure it
I
is.
mean, here it is, what, February? It's probably 60 degrees outside. We could sit out there and it won't be that way tomorrow, but it won't be. So I had sort of, then I completed the flight because I flew from there. And the landing was awful, but the gusty winds there are awful. My wife said it was terrifying, but I was just only mildly scared. Although mildly scared is when you touch down and you're not sure whether the wheels have been driven up through the wings or not.
Navy landing.
I don't know what
Carrier
you call
landings.
but anyway, the plane was okay. Then I flew from there up to Salt Lake City, uneventful, autopilot, just like before, from Salt Lake City back to Colorado Springs. And I said, I think I would rather have the house in Palm Desert than I would have the airplane.
There you go.
That was just that.
So you found a new mission for the money.
You must be a financial planner or a realtor or something.
Well, something like that.
Something.
Yeah,
something
I sell a few houses.
Yeah, but it was not a case of I was scared. But it was a case of a bit frustration because I don't like to fly this thing when I know how well I used to be able to fly it. And when I took the last, got my biannual flight review, and the instructor, who's a retired RAF pilot, said that, and he says, well, you were in the airplane, you saw what you did and didn't do. He says, what do you want me to do? I said, I need a biannual flight review, and he said, okay. So it wasn't an insult, it was a recognition of reality. And
but that's important because, and I'm going to ask you for a word of advice because all of us, I'm still a few years away from that process, but I think about it.
You're going to be 40 one of these days, aren't you?
Yeah, somewhere around there again. But what would your advice be to aging pilots? Because I know that there's a lot of people out there that are probably still flying and they shouldn't be. And I've had this conversation with another. He's passed away since, but with another pilot that was flying an Aerostar. And after that conversation, he did make the decision to sell his airplane. But he did have some fairly significant health issues. But what would you say to watch out for as you're aging, and when is it time to kind of make that decision? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this anymore. How do you do that?
Eric, you've asked a serious question. Nobody ever asked that question. A few that do. I know people that are approaching 100. They're still flying. A guy with a Duke next hangar. I want to fly, but he flies with a safety pilot within sight of the field. And that's not, this airplane deserves better than that.
Yes.
And
you can do that with a simulator.
Simulators are great.
They're pretty darn good.
I love simulators.
Yeah.
All right. But what I guess the best thing to realize is that, of course, you can run out of health and you can run out of money because you can't afford it. It was important to me that my wife of now 20 years was extremely supportive of me flying. She loved to be co-pilot. She didn't want to learn how to fly it and land it. But she was enthusiastic for it. You should go out and maintenance tests and like it. So she was supportive. If you, of course, don't have a supportive companion, it's really easy to quit.
Yeah.
But I think the major thing is I realized that I don't have a mission that pleases me or that makes any kind of sense, and I'm just bored of flying it when nothing happens. But when something does happen, I realize I'm not able to deal. I don't want to fly midnight ILS approach with ice into Colorado Springs in a crosswind anymore. Maybe I did that in the Air Force one time, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I'll do it in a simulator, but then what's the airplane for?
Right.
So the answer, I guess, if there's any advice at all, is that when you finally realize that this isn't as much fun as it used to be, is there something else? As it happened, I had something else that cropped up. But the something else that cropped up, well, it could have been, well, I got a hangar here, get a hangar there, get an AI that stays here and an AI that stays there. But then if something broke, I want to go over and help fix it. That's just not going to work.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough decision that pilots make because, as you know, it gets in your blood, and it's something that you have a drive to do, a passion to do.
Yeah.
And there comes a time when you have to make that decision that says, you know what, if I don't have a mission anymore, then I'm not really utilizing the airplane the way it should be utilized,
Yeah.
and I'm not paying as much attention to my skill set as I should, because you're not being forced to do things because of that mission. And then once that happens and you start to see your skill and proficiency levels start to decline,
Then what do you do?
Then what do you do?
Yeah. I don't, it's a question I never thought about. But my wife pointed out that I've flown for a lot longer than I've been alive. Or a significant fraction of. I can hardly remember when I wasn't flying. But the first Air Force time was free, and the civilians that accumulate thousands of hours in private airplanes have my utmost respect, because that's effort and time and money that someone lucky enough to get military trained, and to some extent flying for a year in Southeast Asia, a forward air controller, it changes your way you look at your life. It changes your discount rate, one day at a time.
And that's when you were flying the Mixmaster,
Yeah,
337.
yeah.
I remember they were used over there. So,
Yeah.
Well, Jack, this has been really great, and I will say I feel honored to have you turn this thing over to me to fly it out to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho tomorrow. And I don't think you've ever done that with anybody.
Never. And you're kind, but I'll tell you, my wife says, well, can Eric fly this thing? Oh, Eric can fly it. Does he really know how to fly 2 ILSs and 3 glide slopes at one time? You know, this kind of thought. And so I don't care so much about you. I care about the airplane going.
Well, thanks a lot.
Go into some better hands than mine, and I'm glad that you're willing to do it. And, you know, I'm troubled with a bad back now, which will be temporary, but I just tired of flying it.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're complimentary and say, boy, look at all this neat stuff you got. It's got all the best round gauges and none of the, except for a MFD thing, which is irreplaceable. But the rest of the airplane is an Aerostar. It's made out of AN parts and engines and fuel and all that stuff.
Yeah, and they're wonderful machines, and I feel blessed that I've had the opportunity to fly these over the last, first time was 1981. The first time I flew an Aerostar,
Was it?
It was 81. And it was a stock 601P. And 60717, I think, something like that. I have to go look it up. And the owner of that airplane's in the Aerostar Owners Association now.
Really?
Yeah.
The first time I flew this, I'd gone out to California, and it was for sale, but they couldn't fly it because they were changing a cylinder, and it had all kinds of problems. And so I got to take off out of, I think it might have been San Francisco. They'd ferried it up there in the rain with 3 people in the back. It might have been at Salinas, I'm not sure. But anyway, it was dark, and I'm the co-pilot. So I'm flying it. I can see outside, the rain in the city. Throttle. So what do you do for rotation speed? Oh, it'll come off the ground. 90 knots, good. So I pulled it off, and as soon as I got the gear up and the flaps up, and I went like this, and I realized that the airplane was connected to me just through my nervous system. There wasn't any lag. The feedback was amazing. The pitch was like this, and I just started laughing. So what's the matter with you? I said, this is the most delightful machine I have ever been in, and it's still that same way.